This episode contains graphic content that may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Good evening, sorry please, how can I help?
Yes, I have a 14-year-old son, and there's an 18-year-old unknown, well, he says he's 18-year-old person, and I feel like he's being groomed. He's being turned against his family and schooling, and it's been ongoing for a while, and I'm getting really concerned that this person isn't actually who he says he is.
We are about to embark on the journey to unraveling the grooming process. I want to give you fair warning. These episodes will contain audio that at times will be difficult to listen to, but I'm including them because it needs to be understood that the grooming of our kids should not be taken lightly. Should you choose not to listen to these episodes, I completely understand, as I too was hesitant to listen. However, if you choose to stick with it, I promise you will learn more about how to recognize patterns of grooming.
When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Welcome to Awareness, a show that will bring you stories that go beyond the headlines. The following is a summary of an article published on February 10th, 2014 by psychologytoday.com. In the United States alone, an estimated 99% of boys and 94% of girls play video games. Video games have become an important part of our popular culture. Dutch researchers suggest that not only do newer video games provide young people with compelling social, cognitive, and emotional experiences, they can also potentially boost mental health and well-being. Video games nowadays can be played either alone, with others, or in competition with thousands of other online players. For most gamers, video games are played for enjoyment and to help improve their mood, along with distracting them from real-world problems. Succeeding in video games can lead to positive feelings, reduced anxiety, and becoming more relaxed. Many gamers report intense emotions of pride and achievement by immersing themselves in games that allow a high sense of control that takes them out of themselves. The benefits of gaming are becoming clear. But are these benefits making our kids vulnerable to the effects of grooming? This series of stories will be told to give you a sense of the dangers of grooming and how the machinations used to manipulate were bold, brazen, and unscrupulous. As you will hear over the next few episodes, predators have new ways of grooming their victims. On today's episode, we are going to begin the grooming series with the story of Breck Bednar, a 14-year-old from Caterham, Surrey, in England. Today, the focus will be online gaming. Stay tuned.
Grooming is a process used by offenders in preparing children for sexual abuse, and it's a process, it's not a one-off event, so it has different stages. So it could start from a person befriending somebody on Facebook or any other social networking site, engaging with them, sharing stories which they know the child is going to be interested in, having common interests, tapping into what hobbies they're interested in.
And also it's about building that relationship, that one-to-one relationship that makes a child actually less likely to speak out or tell a protective adult that they trust about what's happening. The online world creates a real opportunity for offenders because it allows offenders to have that one-to-one relationship much more easily. It cuts out the likelihood of other adults observing what's going on, or parental supervision, or those things that get in the way of a kind of one-to-one relationship between an offender and a child.
We hear many warnings about online predators. We know to teach our children about stranger danger. I would like to think that I would be able to spot a groomer and thwart any dangerous encounters. This story has caused me to rethink what I know and what I can do to protect my kids. Lauren Lefebvre, Breck's mother, was engaged, vigilant. She did all the right things. She spotted the grooming. She spoke to her son, spoke to his friends, spoke to the groomer, and contacted police. And she still couldn't prevent the groomer from reaching his goal.
I'm Lauren, and that's Breck, my son. He is my firstborn, and absolutely wanted to have that kid. Spent years and years trying, and happiest time of my life, really, when Breck was born. He was a good boy right from the start, and one of his favorite things to do was to take things apart and put them together, like a lot of children, but he always seemed to have a bit of a knack. He just had sort of right from the start, sort of a techie little brain. His nickname kind of was Techie Brecky. And it was funny because he loved Bob the Builder when he was 2 years old, and he'd wear a little hat and a little tool belt, and he'd just walk around with little kid tools, and he'd really think he was always fixing things. And as he grew up, he actually was my right-hand man and did fix things around the house. But I remember when he was 2, we went to the toy store, big store, and he looks up, there's Bob the Builder everywhere. And he's just teeny, and he's like, "Oh my God, it's Bob!" And he was just shaking. He was so excited because it was his hero, you know. And, you know, that just was sort of how he was his whole sort of, you know, his whole time growing up. He loved Legos. In year 4, he had friends. I worked at the school where all the children went, a little bit to spy on them. I was also a governor, and I'd watch what they did on the playground, and he was always playing with the boys that were in what I called the Lego gang. So they'd have Lego rockets and Lego guns chasing around the playground, always creating something, making something. And he went to school, when he was young, I think he didn't realize that not everybody has triplets. So he has triplet siblings. And when he went to school when he was young, he said, he came home one day and he said, "Mommy, why do we have so many babies? We have too many babies." But even with that, he always was a good big brother. Even when he started playing, you know, games that were, you know, a bit more violent, he was always chilled and always really good with them. He never lashed out at them. And the triplets absolutely adored him, just looked up to him, and everything that he said or recommended about the computer or about school, they would absolutely do whatever he said. So so then when he got into secondary school, he actually went to a private school for 2 years and did really, really well. And then because of family circumstances, he had to leave. So in year 9, sadly, he had to switch schools, which was a bit hard. I was gutted because I loved where he was. And he was learning so much, and they forced him to play sport, which was good because he actually was good at hockey, and he had really good hand-eye coordination, but he preferred to game and to be on the computer. And I loved his first secondary school because they forced him to do sport. So in year 9 he switched, and he was a bit sad, and he wasn't usually a sad kid, but for the first term he was a little bit sad. And then the second term he was invited into a gaming group by friends that he knew from year 4. So they were in this Lego gang. So I knew them from working with them at school, from having them in the community, from knowing them in the neighborhood. So I felt, you know, happy that they had invited him in, and felt like it was a safe environment because I recognized, you know, most of the boys. Shortly after he started in that group, I noticed that there was a deeper sounding voice. And it did alarm me because even though Breck's voice was changing now, so he's 14, and his voice was changing. He still didn't sound like a man, whereas this sounded like a man online with him. So when Breck would have 3 screens going, and he'd have the middle one would be the gaming and the interacting, and on this screen was sort of a list of the players. They were on TeamSpeak, which is like an open Skype situation, and you could see who was online. And so I said, "Who's that?" And Breck told me it was his friend Lewis, who he met online through friends of friends. And I said, "How old is he?" And Breck said, "Oh, he's 17 going on 18. And guess what, Mom? He works for the U.S. government in New York. And he's so good on a computer that they have him do some contract work for the FBI undercover." And you could see, the look in his eyes that he was just like, this guy is so cool. And I said, "But is that really his picture?" Because the picture looked like a young boy, maybe Breck's age or younger. And he just had dark hair, dark eyes, dark skin. He just looked like some kind of California model, and he was wearing like a tuxedo for prom with a pinky ready bow tie. And I just immediately thought, that just seems unusual for a gaming avatar. Why is this guy dressed like this as a gamer? It doesn't look tough enough. And so I kept asking Breck questions, and he had joined Air Cadets then because he wanted to be a pilot, and it was right up his alley with the sort of tech stuff that he loved. He was studying triple sciences and maths, and IT was his passion. And so he just continued to tell me stories about this new friend, Lewis. And we spent a lot of time in the car together, going back and forth to Air Cadets. And he would say, "Oh yeah, you won't believe it, Mom. Lewis made $2 million in Bitcoin trades and gave it all to the Syrian rebels." I'm like, "Breck, that's a lot of money. How old is he?" And he goes, 17, Mom. He's almost 18. And I would say, even Mother Teresa herself wouldn't give away all that money. That just sounds crazy. And he'd say, "Oh yeah, that's the kind of guy he is. He just, if he has a cause, he just really wants to help people. And he's a really good guy, Mom." So I kept asking questions, and I felt a slight false sense of security that this guy was in New York. But as I would go into Breck's room, the door was always open, sometimes headphones on, sometimes off. And I would, as I would walk in, Breck would say, "My mom's here." Hint, hint. Don't say anything a mom shouldn't hear. And I'd say hi. And it was always like Breck's friends that I knew would get kind of quiet and shy, whereas this older person was very comfortable talking to me as an adult. And at the beginning, we had a bit of banter. And if I had been a dance class, when I walked into the room, a dancing lady would pop up on the screen. It was so interactive and engaging. And I always say I like to go out for a glass of wine with a friend, but what they were doing was, so interactive. It was like a virtual clubhouse, so it wasn't face to face, but because they could have their faces, because there was a live, Skyping situation, but they didn't always have each other on the Skype. They didn't mind. They just, because they all thought they knew who each other were. So as time went on, though, I found it harder and harder to get Breck off the internet, like a lot of parents. Whether it was dinner time, whether it was time to do a chore, or time to go out and do something as a family. And so I was struggling, and he had parental controls that the Wi-Fi would go off at a certain time. But there were times where, the Wi-Fi was on, I just needed him to come do something or go somewhere. And it started to be that when he'd have his headphones on, I'd say, "Come on, Breck, we're going to go do this." And you could tell that he was listening, and you could tell that he's thinking. And it was literally this Lewis friend saying to Breck, "Well, you don't have to go if you don't want to. Just tell your mom you don't want to. Tell your mom you're not hungry." And it was like all of a sudden Breck was torn between doing what I asked him to do, which is what he normally did, and between what this new friend was saying.
Over time, the tone changed as Lauren walked into the room. The lighthearted dancing lady that represented her was now something different.
So as time went on, when I came into the room, I sort of would always be coming in and saying, "Okay, Breck, time to get off." So I kind of became the enemy. And instead of a nice dancing lady on the screen, when I walked into the room, it would be the Wicked Witch of the West would pop up. And the next week I'd walk in the room and it'd be Hitler goose-stepping. So this whole tone changed, that it wasn't sort of fun for me anymore. I was like being turned into the bad guy. So months were going on, and then Breck's personality started changing as well. And it's so difficult at teenage years because, especially with Breck being a boy and I didn't have brothers, I was like, okay, he's a teenager, he's getting more stroppy, but is this normal? Because his personality was changing. He didn't seem as sweet as he had been. He wasn't as, sort of respectful as he had been. He wasn't being horrible, but he just wasn't the same. I could tell that there was something different going on. And he would come out with things like, Well, Mom, Lewis says I shouldn't have to do the chores because the triplets make the mess.
The goal of the groomer is to disconnect the victim from all areas of their lives. It starts off with small things, taking advantage of every opportunity they have, however minute they may be.
Well, this is a little bit true. The triplets are more piglets than he was. He was very careful to not make a mess because he was too busy to want to clean it up. So even when he'd have a drink of water, he'd drink directly out of the tap rather than dirty a glass. And if he wanted a sandwich, he'd just eat bread on a napkin rather than, make a mess. And then he'd say, well, I shouldn't have to go to church anymore. Lewis says, if I don't believe in God, and I don't anymore, I shouldn't have to go. And then he'd say, well, Lewis says I won't have to finish school because he's going to get me a Microsoft apprenticeship when I'm 16. But it was always this that Breck was started to preface everything with Lewis said and Lewis thinks. And, Breck's ideology was all changing, and you could tell that it was all with the influence of this new friend, Lewis. And Lewis was very anti-religion. He kind of claimed to be one religion, but he was against all religions. And then he had an alias, and one alias sounded a bit more ethnic than the other name that he used, and you just couldn't tell what his real background was, and you couldn't tell why he was against some religions more than others. And it was just that he was kind of against everything, but you couldn't understand why. Like you just didn't know. And so he also was against government. So he'd complain about the U.S. government, saying, I work for them, I know, and and he'd have all these reasons why he was against the British government. So he was anti everything. Anything establishment, he was against it.
Anti everything. He was subtly attacking all of Breck's belief systems, and methodically made Breck start to question his positions on those areas of life. By this point, Lauren was extremely suspicious and started reaching out for help to her colleagues at a school where she was teaching.
And I would talk at school I had worked there several years. So being a TA and a governor and a parent, I knew everyone. We were friends. We would, go out together. And nobody at that school at that time ever recommended what I should do or who I should go to, because I would say, I think Breck is being groomed. I think this is a 40-year-old pedophile sitting behind a screen, probably in his underpants, hoping to get one of these boys with that cute picture.
A group of 6 boys were in a gaming group on a server managed by Louis Daines. The group connected regularly via a software program called TeamSpeak, which enabled them to communicate on a chat channel much like a telephone conference call. Breck's father, Barry, describes how he felt about TeamSpeak.
When I first saw TeamSpeak, I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. Breck was so proud to show me this is how it works, this is what it does, and having all those friends of his speaking to him real time, and they were sharing video clips and playing games, and it was like they were in a clubhouse. I think some of his friends were probably there just to play the games, but Breck was very in tune with the technology that was going on. Louis Daines was somebody that had skills or had wherewithal to teach Breck something new about it, and he was learning.
Louis Daines was an 18-year-old unemployed computer engineer who spent his days prowling the internet for victims. As 2 of Breck's friends from the gaming group explain, Louis was hiding his true identity, and some of them grew suspicious.
Louis didn't have any social networking, wouldn't share his face, so we had no idea what he looked like.
I had Breck round for a sleepover. Skyped Louis. Lewis's screen was almost pitch black. It was just, you didn't really see much of Louis. There were no lights on in the rest of the room. It was pretty much silhouetted. I thought it was a little bit weird. I didn't really expect him to sort of skulk away in the shadows, because he sounded like he'd live this glamorous lifestyle, and you'd think he'd, be a bit more confident.
Lauren was persistent, even though she felt she wasn't making any headway in her attempts to find help.
And so I kept using these words, though, that I think Breck is being groomed. When I talked to his school, in secondary, they basically, at parent-teacher conference, looked at his grades. Oh, grades are good. Yeah, no problem, good behavior, lovely boy. He wasn't on anyone's radar. No one thought that when I said I think he's being groomed, that it was something to take seriously, because I didn't have any proof. What I didn't have was like any sexual messages. I didn't have anything that, made someone go, oh, I believe you.
During the over 8 months of grooming, there were not any sexual messages. This surprised me, as I always related grooming with communication that included conversations that were sexual in nature. It wasn't the case in this situation, at least when it comes to how Lewis was grooming Breck.
So then we get into when he started year 10. So over the summers when he got a bit stroppier, and then he decided he didn't want to do air cadets anymore. And then I know now, because there was a lot of infighting going on, and Breck was being isolated by the predator from his family and friends. So the predator started like fights between the boys, and some of Breck went to air cadets with. So Breck, I remember, one of the most upset I ever remember seeing him, he's like, Mama, I can't go to air cadets. And I said, why? And he goes, because someone there is saying really bad things about me. And I said, but so what? There's plenty of other guys there that you do like and you do know. He said, no, I'm just not comfortable. And I now know it was the predator who was trying to start fake fights between the boys so that they would all stop being friends together so that he could, focus on them individually.
Lewis claimed that he had hacked Breck's friends' accounts and told Breck that he overheard the boys talking bad about him. This, of course, gave Breck justification to disregard the fact that his friends were now telling him that something wasn't right about Lewis. So Breck began distancing himself. Lewis now had a firm grip on Breck and successfully isolated him from his friends. Lewis now turned his focus to Lauren and the family.
So Breck was pulling away from air cadets. He was trying to pull away from everything that we normally did. And a lot of times teens don't want to go on family walks anymore. So, how can you tell the difference? It's very difficult. And so at one point then in the autumn, Breck said, Mom, I have a letter for you. And he said, come look on my computer. So we looked on the computer, and it was a 2-page plus manifesto of what Breck should and shouldn't have to do. So it was like, dear Mom, I'm going to say these things, but I shouldn't have to do this because, and I don't want to do that because, but it was all written out in paragraph form, and it was quite adult sounding, and Breck had never done anything else like that before. It was really out of character. And then when I was upset, and I went to print it out because I needed to take it in. I needed to let it sink in. Because he was saying things like, and I can get a Microsoft apprenticeship from Lewis when I'm 16, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. I wasn't trying to stop him. He was only 14, but it was all written like that. And it said, and if you don't let me do what I want with my life, then I'll just run away when I'm 16, and then I'll do whatever I want. So it was like almost these, threats. But he hadn't been like that before, and he had never said it to me face to face. So as I went to print it out, it said written by Lewis Danes, edited by Lewis Danes. So then I knew right there in black and white, it wasn't written by Breck. It was written by this person online who I was worried was grooming Breck. So it just was coming to a head where I couldn't get Breck off, and I had to start yelling. It turned into this, old hag fishwife yelling. And I hated it. So I caught myself, and I just I am fed up with this yelling. At one point, the predator actually recorded me and played it back to the boys and just really sort of embarrassed Breck by saying, this is what poor Breck has to put up with, this horrible mother who won't leave him alone and doesn't understand how clever he is on technology and doesn't understand about computing, and this is what he has to deal with, So he was completely undermining anything that I was trying to do as a parent. So I didn't know that at the time. So I got so upset because I had another what I call witch fits, where I had to really yell to get Breck off. And I hated it because I had never had that kind of relationship. I always, parents yell at their kids, but it was just worse than usual. So I finally made a big decision that I was so worried that this person was grooming my son that I was going to call the police.
Good evening, sorry, please. How can I help?
Yes, I have a 14-year-old son, and there's an 18-year-old unknown, well, he says he's 18-year-old person, and I feel like he's being groomed. He's being turned against his family and schooling, and it's been ongoing for a while, and I'm getting really concerned that this person isn't actually who he says he is.
The call lasted approximately 20 minutes. Lauren explains what else was said.
I said, I don't know if it's for sex. I don't know if it's for hacking of like a government computer. I don't know if it's for terrorism, but he is grooming these boys for something. He's changing all of their ideology. He's turning their personalities, and they're changing them, turning them against their families. And I'm really worried. I said, he says he's 18 now, but I think he's older because he acts older. He's in control of the server and the group. And so so I said to them, can you transfer me to the Department for Grooming? Well, they don't do that. This is a call handler who just takes notes. So then she says, well, what's a server? And I'm just like, she was asking me questions about the computer rather than taking in what I was saying. And then she suggested, why don't you ask him to go to another website? So once again, she wasn't getting it. I never said my son's going on a website and it's dangerous. I said a person is grooming my son, because a groomer isn't just on one website, over time. A groomer infiltrates the child's life. So the boys at that age, they were in year 9, 10 now, coming into year 10, and they had given away their where they lived and personal details and exchanged emails and phone numbers. I think this is a real problem, is trying to find how to pitch to children, because when they're young, of course, you don't want them to give out any personal details. But some of these boys had been gaming with this predator for up to 4 years. So in 4 years, or 1 year like Breck, you think that they're a friend. You don't hide your name. You don't hide what school or where you live, because you've built a relationship and you think that you're friends. So when she said, can you tell him to go on a different website? And I was like, no. And so then she said 3 times, the policewoman, that she would check police intelligence. And that's exactly what I wanted, because I wanted to get proof that this person was actually 40, pretending to be a teenager. Because I believed in my heart of hearts that he was older because of the way he acted, and so controlling and so manipulative. He even, at the end, I went online with him, like live messaging, because Breck said, Lewis wants to talk to you. So we go on live messaging, and he was telling me how to parent my child. And after a few paragraphs of going back and forth, and I just said, listen, Breck is my son, and everything that I do for my children is because I love and care about them. I'm sorry if that's not the situation that you've had, but this is the situation. Breck has rules. He's only 14, and that's that. And that was the last contact that we had. So back to the police, which was just days later, they told me 3 times they would check police intelligence. I wanted to know how old he really was. I wanted to know if he had, anything in the police records. So I felt once again a false sense of security, because there they had told me that they would get back to me if there was anything to tell me. And I thought, that's great, because Breck won't believe me. He was smarter than me in math, science, computing, history, absolutely everything. And so he didn't value my opinion on whether or not this predator was safe, this friend was safe, because he was so much more clever than I in every other way. He'd grown this tall, and he just saw me as the old-fashioned mom who just was clueless. Sadly, I do have, a certain level of intelligence. It's just that he happened to be really clever, and it made him sort of look down on my opinions of everyday life and intuitions and just parents knowing that the world outside is not always perfect. So after I called the police, I called the other parents again that I knew from the gaming group, and I said to them, I've called the police. I'm that concerned. I had said to them before, I'm worried about this guy, Lewis. And they said, well, why? The boys have been gaming with him for years. And I said, does that make it safe? And they're like, what do you mean? So I had to tell them all the stories that I knew that Breck had told me. He was telling the boys that he had flown in the Air Force One with Barack Obama to help save the computers from being hacked, And I was telling them some of the stories because their sons weren't telling them. For some reason, Breck was more open with me. And so they then said, okay, that does sound worrying. So I said, I want to have a meeting, set the boys down together and see what we can piece together. Do you have any more of the parents' numbers? Oh, no, I don't think we need to involve any other parents, they said. I said, no, I really would like to, because the more parents we have, we can make sure that, we figure this out together. And the thing is this family that knew everyone, because they were the vicar in the community, didn't want everyone else to know that his son was online too much. He was embarrassed because there was the element that, he was going to be talked about because his son was having problems online. So the meeting was smaller than I wanted, and if I could turn back time, I'd demand it. I'd go to school and say, please contact these parents, to have them contact me. I want to have a meeting with as many parents as possible. Instead, I sort of looked up to this elder in the community and listened to him when I should have, with my own intuition, demanded more parents at the meeting.
The meeting took place on December 19th, 2013. No one knew it at the time, but Lewis told Breck to record the meeting. The following clip is from that meeting. You will hear Lauren and Barry speaking to Breck about Lewis.
It might sound like paranoia, but it felt like it was even grooming behavior.
It's a harsh term to say grooming.
Yeah.
Well, that's why we're concerned, Breck. And the stuff that we hear scares us to death. It just sounds incredibly odd. Working for a major consulting firm in the U.S. when you're 16 years old. 17. It's fanciful. And what that does is it raises a flag to us that something else is wrong here.
It's going to sound weird, but there's no one else who sort of I bear interest with. Not in real life, in gaming. There's not that connection where you have sort of mutual interest.
Lauren explains what else was discussed during that meeting.
So we held this meeting, and the boys they listened. It was an adult meeting. Like we didn't yell at them. They didn't get upset. It was very mature. And we just said to them, we are willing to meet this guy who you call your friend. We'll meet him in a public place at a coffee shop. And basically they said, no, he won't meet with any parents. He thinks you're all too judgmental. So after we discussed it for about an hour, we just said, listen, if there's no way that he's going to meet up with us, then we cannot let you game, socialize, interact with him on his server because we don't know who he is. He won't show his picture. We tried to Google him. What 18-year-old doesn't have pictures on their profiles? That's the problem most children have, teenagers, is they're over, photographing themselves and overexposing their images online. And so we said, we don't know who he is. We don't know what, how old he really is. We don't know where he really lives. It never seemed like he was in New York to me. He never seemed to be on U.S. time. And then at this point, he said he had moved to Greenwich in London, which then, of course, worried me as well, because that's just that much closer to Surrey, where we were. So we said to the boys, if he's not going to meet with us and we don't know who he is, then that's it. We're going to have to forbid you from gaming, interacting, socializing, playing at all with this person. And they reluctantly agreed. They said they had another server for some boys in school that they could join. It wouldn't be as good, but they would do it. So at the end of that meeting, we thought we had fixed the problem. And that's when everything really got worse, because then it went underground. You think about forbidding your child from something because you know it's a danger, and if it just turns it underground, it actually makes it even more dangerous. So I gave Breck's equipment back after Christmas, and I said, make sure you don't go online anymore with Lewis. And he said, I know. And he was disappointed, but he agreed. So then I didn't know it at the time, but one of the other boys got caught back on the server with Lewis. They caught him, and I listened for Breck. I never heard that deep voice again. I never heard Breck say his name. I never heard Breck say a new name, because I was listening out because he already had an alias that I had reported to the police. I'd given the police his name, his alias, his age that he said he was, the age I thought he was, and the county that he originally was from. I passed all those details to the police. So because he already had an alias, I listened out for an alias. I listened for a new name or a new, friend. Nothing. And Breck's room was off the kitchen. And if any mom knows how much time we all spend in the kitchen, it's amazing that they still were communicating with me not knowing. So this other family found one of the boys online with the predator, kicked him back off, but didn't contact me and say, oh, how we kicked our sons off of the, playing with this person we're worried about. our son got caught back on, your son might be on as well. They didn't bother to text, call, or send that message, because at that point I would have been re-alerted and I would have been able to report again my concerns, or also address Breck and say, listen, your friend's online with him, are you as well? But I didn't know it. Everything seemed back to normal. Breck got a new big boy room, got away from his messy triplet brother, and we redecorated, we shopped, we painted his room together. It was a great time. He was actually helping me to retrain because they were all in secondary at this point, and I needed to make more than a TA salary to pay the bills. So he was helping me to retrain, and we were getting along. I wasn't yelling to get him off the computer anymore. He was being more respectful, totally back to his self. And he no longer was saying, Lewis says this and Lewis says that. So I thought I had fixed the problem.
Lauren's story takes us to February of 2014. And Breck was going to Spain on an exchange trip. Lauren was also taking a trip to a different part of Spain for a speaking engagement. So they spent the night packing together.
So we had a nice evening together. And the next day, I stuffed in a little host gift and a card and some chocolates for him. And we said goodbye. And he was going to the airport. He got a lift. He was so grown up seeming. I mean, he was tall and clever. I thought mature, I thought world-wise, because he'd spent a lot of time in London. He even had a job there in the summer. And I was so impressed, that a 14-year-old would get up and go work in London for the summer. If he worked for like 3 or 4 weeks. So I just trusted him implicitly as well. So as we were saying goodbye, we said we loved each other and hugged and kissed. And I said, don't forget to speak Spanish, because they'll probably know more English than we know Spanish. So don't cheat. And, as he left, we were on perfect terms. And as he walked away, I just never expected that to be the last time that I would see him alive. He texted me a couple days later and he said, Mom, it is so beautiful here. The people are nice. The scenery is lovely. And I just thought, yes, this is so good, because he's away from the computer, he's in another country, seeing another culture, he's with, friends from school, and not just online friends from school, he's with, boys and girls and hanging out. And I was so pleased for him. I didn't find out till much later, but he actually, the triplets said when he came home, their dad picked him up from the airport and it was his weekend. And the triplets said, Breck was so happy when he came home. And I said, why? And they said, because he had his first girlfriend. And I said, wow. And I didn't know it at the time, but he had posted a picture of he and this girl leaning their heads in together on Facebook. He had never done that before. He rarely used Facebook. It's kind of like a grandma and a mom thing to do. And he just kept away from it. And, here he had posted this little picture. Well, afterwards, we found out this predator went crazy. Take that picture off. She looks like a whore. She looks like a slut. Everybody's going to think you slept with her. And I always say, wish he did sleep with her, because it would have been his only chance. But this predator went crazy, obsessed and jealous. And there was just a trail of emails and calls and texts over that trip, just barraging, stalking him. Breck, why aren't you answering? Breck, why aren't you, you need to be studying. I've given you some things to learn. You have to understand you're the only one I trust. You're the only one that's going to be able to run this company when I die. I'm very sick, Breck. I'm not going to make it much longer. There were literally texts with coughs and sputters. And then there'd be a little gap, and he'd go, oh, sorry, Breck, sorry, I passed out. Wow, I really need you. You're the only one I trust, and you're so clever that you can do this, Breck. You can do it, but you've got to study. So the police said he had given Breck months of software information to study on this week-long trip, to try to obviously alienate him from the friends on the trip and be busy with this project. So the day Breck came home, he asked his dad, can I go to see my friend Tom tomorrow? We're going to work on our computers. And his dad said, yes. So at 7 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, a taxi knocked on the door and picked Breck up. 7 in the morning, a 14-year-old gets in a taxi. 2 people see it, 2 people who know about my concerns about Breck being groomed, and those 2 people do nothing. So the taxi then trafficked. Well, the predator had paid for the taxi to traffic Breck an hour away to Essex, to the county where I had reported that this predator lived. It was about 100 pounds, and it was about an hour away, and Breck went at 7 in the morning. Later that morning, he texted his dad and said, "You'll be so proud of me. I'm upgrading my operating system. Can I stay, have pizza, and spend the night?" And his dad said, "Yes."
The day was Sunday, February 16th, 2014. This was the last day Barry would see his son alive.
So later that afternoon, Breck's old hand-me-down iPhone goes dead. Okay, well, yeah, some iPhones end up having batteries that aren't the greatest, but his phone went dead. So by the afternoon, Breck was no longer contactable. Once again, I'm unaware, because I'm not watching him that weekend. The next morning, I wake up on my birthday with an impending sense of doom. And I'm thinking, why do I feel this way? Is it because I'm another year older? I don't really care. Is it because my boyfriend never buys me a present or gets me a card on my birthday? Oh yeah, that does make me mad. Is it because my head mistress was angry because I took off Friday to do this special exchange trip, even though I found another TH cover? Could be that. Why do I feel this way? Is it because I don't have my kids here on my birthday with their happy faces to say, "Happy birthday, Mom"? I knew something was wrong. And a woman right after that asked me, "For your birthday, would you like a healing treatment?" I said, "Sure," never realizing how much healing I would need to do. And then I get a text from my ex-husband saying, "I'm really mad at Breck. He was supposed to be home at 10. I have to go to London to work, so the triplets are home alone." So I immediately get on the phone and start phoning. And I call Breck's friends and their numbers at their house. And I'm getting the rigmarole. I said, "Where's Breck?" "He's with Tom." "Where's Tom?" "He's with his parents." "Where's his parents?" "Oh, they're on a family holiday." Okay, next kid. "Where's Breck?" "He's with Tom." "Where's Tom?" "He's with his family." "Where?" "In Devon." "Where's Breck?" So just this rigmarole. Finally, I get through to someone. I say, "Where is Breck?" I'm desperate, They said, "Breck's really unwell. He's really unwell." And I'm like, Breck's never unwell. He stopped eating his vegetables in secondary school, but he was never unwell, that kid. And I knew something was wrong. And I said, "Where is Breck?" And they said, "He's with Lewis." And of course, my heart sunk.
At around this time, Tom, one of Breck's friends, was logged on to TeamSpeak. Lewis was on and said that Breck was dead and posted pictures of Breck. After that, Lewis called 999, the UK equivalent of 911.
Essex Police Emergency.
Hi there. Okay. Hello. I need police and a forensics team to my address, please.
What do you mean? What's happened?
My friend and I got into an altercation, and I'm the only one who came out alive.
Are you telling me you've killed somebody?
Yes, I am.
Right, and who am I speaking to?
My name is Lewis Daines. I'm 18 years old, and I live...
Right, okay. And what's actually happened?
My friend came to stay the night with me yesterday, feeling very down, feeling suicidal. And I woke up this morning, he was in a mess. I tried to calm him down. I hugged him, then said that I was there for him. He shrugged me off.
Can you just bear with me a second? Don't tell me any more, okay? You're telling me he is definitely dead?
Yes, I'm telling you he's definitely dead.
Right, okay, Lewis, I need you to just take me back through that again. So what happened last night?
Okay. He came to stay with me because he was feeling down. I tried.
What's his name?
Breck. B-R-E-C-K. Bednar. B-E-D-N-E-R.
Sorry, B-R-E-C-K. Breck?
Yes.
And then his surname is?
Bednar. B-E-D-N-E-R.
Okay, so he came to stay with you.
I can explain this to the officers when they get
I will just. I need to take these initial details.
I know. He came to stay with me the night. I did my best to comfort him. I woke up this morning. He was in a mess. I tried again.
Right, just slow down again, Lewis. I need to take these deep. So did you have an argument with him last night?
No, we were fine.
You were fighting?
No, we were fine. We were fine last night. We both went to sleep. I said that we were fine.
Okay, but why did he come to stay with you?
Because he was fed up with his home life.
Right, because he was fed up with his home life.
He's had a lot of problems. I've known him for a long time. He came to stay with me. I was in Thailand last week on holiday. He was in Spain on holiday.
Okay,
we both got back.
So
met up.
you both went to bed, and then what's happened this morning?
I woke up. He was just standing up. He was in a mess, hands on his face. I got up. I put my arms around him, and I said it was okay. He just shrugged me off and said no. I can't remember exactly what he said. He was going on about how he didn't want to go home. He was fed up with his life, and he didn't want to go.
Right,
and
okay.
I have a penknife on the side of, in my room, adjacent to my bed. I have a chest of drawers. After shaving the TV and stuff on there, I had a penknife on there, folded. He picked it up, opened it, and then lost control.
Slow down. Let me just take those details here. Penknife on the bedside table. Breck grabbed this.
Yeah.
What, in order to harm himself?
No, in order to harm me. He opened it and then lost control.
To harm informant and opened it. It states he lost control.
In self-defense, put my left arm up to block him from stabbing me effectively. We struggled. I got him to the ground. He got up. I got the knife. Can you not interrupt me with this part?
Okay, go on.
Okay. This is being recorded anyway, isn't it?
Yep.
I grabbed the knife and I stabbed him once in the back of the neck, I believe somewhere near the brainstem. He turned around, tried to carry it on, and I think I stumbled on my chest of drawers. I fell over. I got back up, backed away, and then I don't remember exactly what happened, but the fight ended with me cutting his throat. I believe I turned around and I slashed his throat.
Right.
He fell face first on my bed. I tried to stop the bleeding.
Yep.
He fell onto the floor.
Yep.
I couldn't stop it. His throat was properly cut.
And he's still on the floor?
Yes. He fell onto the bed face first. I was trying to compress the wound at that time. And
Lewis, are you still in the room where Breck is?
No.
Where are you?
Look, don't interrupt me. Just let me explain this if this is being recorded. I didn't know what to do. I felt like...
Right, is the house where you are and where Breck is, yeah? But you're in another room, are you?
Yes, I felt like taking my own life. I don't remember what happened after that. All I know is I dropped the knife in my hallway. I stripped down and just sat in the shower.
Right, you've left the weapon in the hallway.
Yes.
And have spent how long sitting in the shower?
I don't know. Look, are the police on their way? I can hear something.
They are.
Okay, I'm going to go and do my part. Please, thank you for your help.
Right, just listen.
Had anybody alerted me earlier, I could have alerted the police, and I just have these dreams that I burst through the door. But the next phone call I got was the absolute worst phone call a parent could ever get in their lives. It came a few minutes later, and it just said, I don't know how to tell you this, but Breck's been murdered by Lewis. And I couldn't stop screaming. I damaged my hearing, and my life ended.
How does this happen? Lauren and her family did everything they could. They reached out for help, called group meetings, removed equipment, called the police, and even spoke to the groomer. Why did none of these things work? Well, it turns out that this might have been avoided. When Lauren called the police the first time to report potential grooming, she asked if Louis Daines was known to them. They told her they would check on it. It turns out that Louis Daines was in fact known to them, but they never checked. An investigation was opened to review the incident.
This is a case that we decided that we did want to investigate it as an independent investigation. And I think we were aware that it raised a number of issues. There were obviously issues around grooming. There were issues around the way that the force had responded to the call made by Lauren. But most importantly, we recognized that there were probably going to be issues of learning.
So my role was to gather information and evidence, to analyse that information and evidence, to establish exactly what Lauren had said during that call and the response of both the call handler and the call closer. What the call handler failed to do was conduct a PNC check, that's a Police National Computer check. Had she done that, she would have established that Louis Daines had in fact in 2011 been investigated for an alleged rape of a minor. Had the call handler had that information to hand, she would potentially have taken a different course of action.
So one of the big questions here was this limited to Surrey force, or if Breck's mum had called other forces, would she have had the same response? Would another call handler have gone further? And it was really important to us to try and identify whether this was an individual failing or whether it was a total system failure. Now, one of the things we haven't done as part of this case is carried out an audit of all forces to see what child protection policies they have in place and how their call handlers apply those. But we did identify that it was important that we asked other forces to carry out a review of their own processes. And what I have done is written to the MPCC and asked them to encourage forces to do that, because we want to be clear that if any parent does what Lauren did, picks up the phone, calls the police and says, I'm concerned about my child, and mentions key words which should trigger some sort of response around potential child sexual exploitation, radicalization, that actually they will get a very robust response from the force.
This case slipped through the cracks. There's no way to truly know if the outcome would have been different, but the Bednar family will never know. After pleading guilty to murdering Breck Bednar, on January 12, 2015, Louis Daines was sentenced to life in prison. After the sentencing, Lauren spoke to the media.
David Lefebvre Bednar. How a person can value life so little is very difficult for me to comprehend. We hope that between the coroner and the IPCC in their investigations, they can get to the bottom of why this tragedy took place on my birthday of last year, when Breck's life was brutally cut short by this vile menace to society. Breck had so much potential and so much to give this world. He was a gentle, calm, intelligent, good-humored, and handsome boy who had his whole world and life ahead of him, to attend university, to fall in love, have a family, and to pursue his dream of becoming a pilot and working in technology. No amount of years behind bars will ever change the poisonous attitude and actions of a psychotic animal who can behave this way. No amount of years will bring back the lovely boy taken from us. Life is fragile. How can we get through to these evil people, pedophiles preying on children, abusers, fighters, and terrorists killing so many innocent victims? I ask, please put your weapons away, your guns and your knives and your jealousy. Just try to find a way to make life better and not worse for everyone. If we cannot get through, then we must protect ourselves by looking after each other. We need to report and act on actions that are potentially harmful. We need to be more diligent in our own lives to help save others. We need to love and support our children so that they grow into healthy, happy, loving, and safe citizens.
Unfortunately, we cannot all have the resources that savvy Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie do. They have hired a private internet security team to watch over their children's interactions and safety online. I wish we did. Good move on their part. I would embrace any help from them and others who have the resources to help. However, we need the government to make a commitment to funding police forces to properly investigate complaints involving children, and for information to be shared between agencies and their families and friends so they're not forever heartbroken. I phoned the police 2 months prior to Breck's murder, alerting them of my concerns regarding the grooming by Danes, and I believed the police would help me. I had given them enough information to check their systems to see that, in fact, Danes was known to the police. We all make mistakes, but incompetence in child protection is unacceptable. Something major must be done to make improvements in child online safety. The internet is such a vast opportunity for educating, socializing, and enjoying, but we need to keep it safe for children, as there is also a really very real danger. Life is miserable for us now, painful and sorrowful every day. Nothing can ever replace the hole left in our hearts. I will forever miss my son Breck, and that is why we have set up the Breck Bednar Memorial Foundation in his name to help improve these issues. The tagline, "Play Virtual, Live Real," was created to remind teenagers and children to keep true friends and online friends separate, as anyone can pretend to be something that they are not when they hide behind a screen. Poor vulnerable Breck, who was groomed and manipulated by Danes on that fateful journey to Grays, thought he was going to begin a successful career in computer science, only to fatally realize, too late, that this friend was actually a cold-blooded child molester and murderer. Please use Breck's voice and story to talk to the children in your lives. Unfortunately, I can never get my son back, but you still have time to save yours. Thank you.
Teaching our kids about internet safety has become an emergency. We can't just sit back and let the stranger danger talk be the only information they get. We need to show them the signs of grooming, what it looks like, how does it work, and what are the possible outcomes. It's not going to be easy, but as parents, we need to take our vigilance to the next level. These predators are adaptive, cunning, and are always looking to satisfy whatever deviant needs they may have. It might not be enough for you to know the signs of grooming. As you heard, Lauren was on top of it. She did all that she could to try to stop it. But it was too late. The grooming had a firm grip on Breck, and there was nothing else she could do to prevent it. Another takeaway from this story is that the authorities may not be as helpful as we would expect. As also mentioned by Lauren, we need to keep pushing until our voices are heard if we ever find ourselves in this situation. We need to be proactive about internet safety because being reactive could be deadly. And that's going to do it for this episode. The next episode drops in 2 weeks with the next story about grooming. The Facebook discussion group has been set up for the grooming episodes. There are no restrictions on the group and everyone is welcome. The social media links are in the show notes. Thanks to Shane Yoder and his team at PutThemInASong.com for the theme music and Ed Luby for the awareness logo. And as always, thanks to my family for allowing me to share these stories with you in order to spread awareness. Until next time, stay engaged and stay aware. I'll talk to you soon.